Good afternoon. Welcome to the tea table. I am so happy you have joined me today. And I have a special friend, a wonderful young woman named Heidi.
Hi.
And her name is Heidi Chaffee. And we are going to have a wonderful Christmas journey. Heidi is wearing her Scandinavian sweater, and she's very Norwegian but American, right? And Heidi, tell me why you're coming on the Tea Talk today.
Thank you for inviting me on the Tea Talk. I'm excited to speak about Norway and about missions work and about my family and what God has done.
And by way of background, I'll just say I have known Heidi since she was a very little girl. And when we lived in Shelton, her father was practicing Dr. Chaffee. He's a wonderful Harvard-trained physician, just a wonderful old-fashioned doctor. And her mother, Jeannie, is, she's hard to describe, isn't she? She is amazing. And we met them through our oldest daughter, Victoria, who taught violin to her sister, Sarah. And so through the years, we've become very close friends. And Heidi just came to my class at the seminary, my missiology class, and it shared about her recent trip to South America. She covers almost every continent. So I am going to let you start from the beginning. Maybe from Norway.
Okay.
From your grandfather,
Sounds
great-grandfather.
good. Yes.
Okay,
All
go
right,
for it.
let's start. So my great-grandfather is Peter Torgerson, and I have a little picture of him.
Maybe put it closer.
I don't know if you can see that. So Peter Torgerson, when he was in his late teens, he felt the call to missions, and he didn't have any money, but he wrote on a little piece of paper and put into the offering plate, "And my life," in Norwegian, it's "Og mitt liv." And so he put that in the offering plate because he wanted to give his life to God and serve as he felt that was what God was calling him to. And he went to study the Bible, and then he went to China as a missionary. And his motto was, "Send me to the place no one else wants to go, where people don't know Jesus." And so they sent him to Ho Chi, and he married my great-grandmother, and they had 4 children. And he served in rural China 3 days by train. Sorry, after the end of the train, it was another 3 days, like by donkey or by foot. So very, very rural to get to.
And what year would that have been?
Oh, this is like the late
30s?
1930s, I believe.
In the early 1930s, yes.
So,
well, because I will fill in here, I know a little bit of the story from your mother, that then they were serving in China and World War II came. And that was very dangerous because they were being bombed by the Chinese, right?
By the
Japanese. By the Japanese, yes. And they were being bombed. And so then they had to go into camps, right?
Yeah.
What was that camp? Was it an internment camp?
Yeah, so that was later on in the story where they were, part of the family was in the Weishin internment or prison camp. But before that happened, Peter and Valborg ran their church was kind of like a rescue mission for Chinese escaping the war and the bombing, and they wanted to provide a place where they could get food. Valborg was a nurse, so they provided health care and food and prayed for people, and led many to Christ. And they continued doing that even though many people left during the war. And they ended up, ultimately, Peter lost his life in one of the bombing raids.
Well, and what happened, if you know the story of Chariots of Fire, that famous movie, Eric Liddell, remember he won the race, and then he goes to China, and he was in the same camp with your aunt, and they lived there. But tell how Peter lost his life.
Yeah, so he was protecting the Chinese Christians. I believe he got everyone out of the church, and then the bomb came down and beam fell on him. So he did give his life in China, which he had promised to God as a young man, not knowing that that was a path God would call him to, which is a testimony.
So then one of his children was Bestafar that we knew. Bestafar is grandpa.
My grandfather.
Her grandfather. And that's where I met him when he was an old man. And so then Bestafar was a young boy, and they all had to leave China, right?
Yes.
After the war.
Yes.
And they went where?
So Bestafar came to this, he came, and I believe he worked for the Norwegian military. He was required by the Norwegians to do some military service. So I think he worked in like the shipyards. They put him in the shipyards in, I believe, Brooklyn, New York, as part of his military service, checking in the ships. And then he went to Bible school. During this time that was happening, my great-grandmother and 3 of my great uncles and aunts were locked in the prison camp. They eventually were given their freedom through, I believe, 5 American paratroopers came in and liberated the Waitian prison camp.
Oh, wow.
And then they were able to come to the States, and some of them went to Norway. But later on, Edvard and Jenny, who I believe he met during Bible school, went back to China they went back to Taiwan to serve. And they did Bible translation in Taiwan. They had originally gone to, I believe, to Hong Kong and China, and then because of the political unrest, they went to Taiwan. And he had a degree in basically that would enable him to do translation work. I don't remember the exact name of that degree.
He had a doctor in theology.
Yes.
He told me what he did, his thesis on, was quite interesting. He did he gave a historical documentation to all the great revivals in Norway, which would have been one of those that your great-grandfather had been attending when he wrote on the piece of paper. You know, the missionary had come through calling people to give their lives to China or to come and help the people. So didn't your grandfather then translate the Bible into Mongolian?
He worked when he was in Hong Kong. They worked on part of the Mongolian Bible with the Gunzels, who were also missionaries in China at that time, working on the Mongolian Bible. But the majority of his translation work was with the Amish tribe in Taiwan, in the mountains of Taiwan. And then he called for a healthcare provider to the mission organization for the tribal groups, because in Taiwan at that time there was a lot of racism towards anyone who was non-mainlander. So there was, I believe, 12 mountainous tribes in Taiwan, and so they were rejected from coming into the hospitals and the clinics, and a lot of them had polio and various illnesses that were being untreated. So the missions agency sent Dr. Frank Dennis, who's a very strong Christian, loves God, and he came out and built a hospital, which is still going now 60 years later.
Wow.
And it's the largest cancer scanner in Taiwan. It's at least 11-story hospital, and they're serving many, many tribes, and many have come to know Christ through healthcare and through the combined work of missions and healthcare.
And then Bestafar, he was back in China working, and then her mother is the youngest child of Bestafar and his wife, and she was not born in China. She was born in Taiwan. But her siblings were born
They were born in Taiwan mostly.
Mostly in Taiwan. Well, when I met your grandfather, it was so fascinating. The American government had called him back to Washington, D.C. to testify before the Senate about China, because tell what happened in the 90s.
So in the 90s, unexpectedly, the Chinese government started honoring what they would consider their heroes, and one of them ended up being my great-grandfather, and they honored him as a hero of the people because of his act of caring for the Chinese during the bombing and taking them in and providing health care and helping them sustain them through the war. So because of that, the Chinese government asked the family to come back and meet at the vice governor's palace in Shanxi province, which is where the site of the I believe 40 some missionaries were killed there about 100 years earlier at that same site. So it was kind of scary to go back for them, knowing you're going to Chinese communist country and not knowing what the exact situation was. At that time, I don't believe there were many foreigners openly serving in China in the 90s. So.
And they built a statue to her grandfather, Peter Torglason, that is in China today. I mean,